A wealthy millionaire found his heart stirred by a humble girl selling water. Before we dive into the narrative, please share a comment about your location while you're tuning in. Delight in the tale. Dylan Mitchell navigated the bustling streets of New York, his focus shifting as he parked his car and noticed something intriguing. A young girl stands with a bottle of water, enthusiastically announcing, "Ice cold, refreshing water, just $2. Who is interested in one?" She waved and shouted to passersby as if she were the proprietor of the finest establishment in the area. Her hair was gathered in a haphazard bun, and her tattered t-shirt paired with faded jeans revealed the struggles she faced. Yet, what truly captured attention was her assured stance. Just as Dylan was about to take a step forward, a man appeared in her path. "Please provide me with a glass of water." He seized a bottle and uncapped it, his gaze never drifting in her direction. She presented it to him with her usual enthusiasm. $2. Chilled water directly from my cooler." The man swallowed deeply, then his expression darkened. $2? Seriously? The price at the store is only half that amount. Are you attempting to take advantage of me? Dylan observed the blaze in the girl's gaze. She appeared completely unfazed. Take advantage of you? I strolled along the street 3 times to purchase this water. I hoisted a hefty cooler onto my shoulder, basked in the sun, and shouted with wild abandon. If you're looking for a better price, consider purchasing it at the store. The man advanced with purpose. This is a complete scam. You are exploiting diligent individuals. She advanced as well, her finger directed at him with conviction. Exploiting an opportunity? You've already consumed half of it. Unwilling to make a payment? Please return the water to the bottle and hand it back to me. The man blinked, his eyelids fluttering briefly in the dim light. Excuse me? Just say it already. If you choose not to pay, please return the water you consumed. Proceed. His eyes grew large with surprise. This is utterly absurd, he exclaimed with frustration. It's absurd how some individuals expect to receive everything without any cost. You haven't compensated for it, so return it immediately. I want my water returned. Onlookers erupted in laughter. Dylan observed, captivated. The man flushed with anger, scanned his surroundings, and then forcefully tossed a crumpled bill onto the table before storming away. Dylan was utterly captivated by her presence. She stood apart. Unbeknownst to him, he began to make his way toward her. Sophia was meticulously arranging the bottles in her cooler when a shadow caught her attention, looming in front of her. She glanced upward and beheld a striking figure clad in an impeccably tailored suit. He appeared utterly mismatched on the sweltering sidewalk, as if he had just stepped out of a corporate office and into this vibrant tableau. His dark brown hair was meticulously arranged, his face bore a solemn demeanor, and his blue eyes sparkled with a keen intellect. She regarded him with a wary gaze. "Are you in need of a drink?" Dylan hesitated before responding. "How many bottles are in your possession?" Sophia squinted, her gaze sharp and focused. "What is the reason?" "I desire to acquire each and every one of them." She blinked, taken aback. "Every single one? What is the reason?" Dylan retrieved his wallet and casually placed a $100 bill on the table. "Feel free to reach out if you require any adjustments." Sophia folded her arms across her chest. "Looking to make an impression on someone? If that's how it is, then there's no need to proceed. I already find you quite peculiar." Dylan arched an eyebrow. "I have a keen appreciation for a solid investment." "Oh, so water has become a valuable asset now? It seems the market has shifted, and I was left out of the loop." Dylan maintained her gaze, as though dissecting each word that escaped her lips. "Your negotiation skills are impressive. Your character shines through. You stood your ground, refusing to be intimidated by that guy's attempts to deceive you." Sophia observed him intently, attempting to decipher his true nature. "True, but that still doesn't clarify why a man in formal attire is spending $100 on water from the street." He offered a faint smile, yet remained silent. With quiet determination, he gathered the bottles and began transporting them to a nearby luxury car park. Sophia narrowed her eyes. Really, you're gonna take every single one of them? That was the agreement, wasn't it? Indeed, it does appear quite questionable. Dylan remained unperturbed. Perhaps my intention is simply to offer assistance. If that's the situation, hold on to your funds. I prefer to earn what I have. He took a moment, locking his gaze onto hers. It's not a gift. I value things based on their true worth, and your time is certainly worth much more than just $2 a bottle. Sophia paused, her silence stretching out for a moment. His manner of speaking had an unusual quality, as if he meticulously selected each word prior to uttering it. Deep down, she sensed the truth in his words, yet she was determined to keep that realization hidden. If that's how you choose to spend your money, that's entirely up to you. She tucked the bill into her pocket, yet her curiosity had already been ignited. Dylan set the final bottles in the car, pausing for a moment to gaze at her one last time before entering. Catch you later, vendor. Sophia scowled. If you require additional water, you know where to locate me. Dylan offered a faint smile. It wasn't a self-satisfied grin. It was understated, intriguing. He entered the car and drove away, yet for the first time in ages, his mind lingered on another person. And he was aware. It certainly wouldn't be the final encounter he had with Sophia. Dylan Mitchell had a knack for maintaining his concentration on the matters of business. He remained utterly focused, avoiding trivial discussions, steering clear of social gatherings, and eliminating superfluous exchanges. Yet that morning, perched in his opulent office high above the bustling streets of New York, he came to the unsettling realization that his thoughts were drifting elsewhere. Or perhaps on another individual, Sophia Carter, the street girl who sold water with the resolve of a savvy entrepreneur striking deals worth millions. He couldn't grasp why it continued to trouble him. He considered it merely a straightforward transaction. Just that, nothing else. And still, the memory of her remained unwavering. Dylan attempted to brush it off. He lifted the receiver, examined the documents, and engaged in a significant conversation regarding a new agreement. Yet, amidst the flurry of tasks, his thoughts continually wandered back to that fleeting moment on the sidewalk. Her fearless stance against that man was truly remarkable. She clung to each coin as though it were a treasure beyond compare. Her response to him was filled with caution and a hint of sarcasm. It felt like she possessed an unyielding resistance to his influence. And that piqued his curiosity. He gazed out the window. The heavens stretched wide and unblemished. The sun gleamed brilliantly in the sky. Perhaps she remained in that place. Dylan snatched his car keys and exited the office, leaving without a word to anyone. Sophia stood precisely in the place he had envisioned, positioned on the familiar sidewalk, brandishing a water bottle, reaching out to passers-by with the same enthusiasm as the previous day. Chilled water, just $2. Dylan eased his car to a stop at the corner, then emerged, seamlessly merging with the throng of people around him. He remained in place, observing intently. Sophia promoted it as though it were the most incredible opportunity imaginable. As someone drew near, she greeted them with a smile, shared a light-hearted joke, and made her point with determination. With a casual shrug, she turned her attention to the next individual when they declined. She remained undeterred, and Dylan came to a profound realization. Those $2 per bottle held a significance beyond mere currency for her. They embodied resilience. That's what covered her education, her expenses, her meals. He sensed an unusual stirring within him, something unknown. Without a second thought, he made his way toward her. Sophia spotted him right away. She ceased to offer water and folded her arms. Ah, the whimsical tycoon has returned. Dylan arched an eyebrow. My identity is defined by a name. That's wonderful. So, Dylan, are you here to purchase more water? He cast a quick look at the cooler brimming with bottles before returning his gaze to her. Perhaps. Sophia squinted, her gaze sharp and focused. Perhaps. So, you're not here due to the warmth, I see? Dylan maintained a mask of neutrality. I found myself intrigued. What piques your interest? Concerning you. She emitted a brief, sardonic chuckle. I had no idea that millionaires had an interest in street vendors. You appear to have changed. It appears you are someone who is quite persistent. Dylan wore a subtle smirk. Did I strike a chord? Is it your habit to appear in people's lives unexpectedly like this? He gave a slight shrug. It's only when something piques my interest. Sophia observed him intently. Dylan Mitchell exuded an air of self-assurance, evident in his stance, his tone, and his demeanor. Every aspect of him exuded a sense of power. Yet, for some inexplicable reason, he failed to instill any sense of intimidation in her. She seized a bottle and rattled it before him. Well, Mr. Curious, the question remains. Will you make the purchase or not? Dylan grasped the bottle yet refrained from removing it from her grip. His cerulean gaze fixed intently on hers. Do you find it odd that I purchased all your water yesterday? I certainly do. So, what's holding me back from trying it once more? Myself. Dylan arched an eyebrow. And you? Sophia retracted the bottle. I prefer that you don't purchase everything. I provide water to sustain myself, not so some wealthy individual can toss cash my way without purpose. Dylan remained quiet for a brief moment. He reached into his wallet and extracted a $20 bill. Consider it a gift. Sophia accepted the bill, yet her demeanor changed subtly. If you believe you can purchase my loyalty, you're mistaken. Dylan remained silent. He seized the bottle, twisted off the cap, and savored a sip. After wiping his lips, he turned his gaze back to her. Catch you later, vendor. He pivoted and began his journey back to the vehicle. Yet Sophia found it impossible to resist. Hold on. Dylan halted in his tracks, yet he remained facing away. What is it exactly? She grasped the bill tightly in her hands. What prompted you to take that action? He tilted his head slightly, allowing her a glimpse of his expression. Simply because I desired to. With no further comment, he entered his vehicle and departed. Sophia stood there, gazing at the bills in her palm. She found herself at a loss for words, yet there was an undeniable quality about that man that left her feeling uneasy. For the first time, she realized he occupied her thoughts more than she intended. The following day arrived, accompanied by a gentle breeze that danced through the streets of New York. The warmth had eased compared to earlier days, yet the city buzzed with its usual fervor. Sophia repositioned the cooler beside her improvised table, readying herself for another day of labor. Yet, beneath the surface, an unmistakable shift lingered, or perhaps a thought lingering in her mind. Dylan Mitchell. She was uncertain of the reason, yet, ever since he departed the day prior, his words continued to resonate in her mind. Simply because I desired to. That troubled her. She was not fond of the notion of someone taking action on her behalf without her request. Sophia always believed in earning her keep, never accepting anything without a price. Absolutely not. That's why she chose to move on from it all. She would carry on with her day as she always did, no longer preoccupied with thoughts of him. That was her belief at the very least. Dylan Mitchell found it impossible to shake her from his thoughts as well. In his office, surrounded by reports and the constant buzz of meetings, he found it increasingly difficult to shake off the persistent urge to see her once more. It was utterly perplexing. She was merely a street vendor, a simple girl lacking wealth, prestige, or any ties to his realm. Yet, there was something captivating about her unwavering strength, her refusal to submit to anyone. Dylan had never encountered anyone quite like her. By late afternoon, he found himself back in his car, making his way to the street corner where he was certain she would be waiting. Sophia was diligently arranging the cash in her register when she felt the presence of someone nearing her. Please tell me that today you managed to buy water without any fuss. She lifted her gaze and found Dylan standing before her. And what if I chose not to? Sophia let out a deep breath, folding her arms across her chest. In that scenario, an entrance fee will be required for the show. He offered a faint smile. Rest assured, I'm not planning to purchase all your bottles again if that's your concern. Excellent. My business caters to everyday customers, not extravagant millionaires. Dylan brushed off her sarcastic tone and casually tucked his hands into the pockets of his suit. Since we're in the realm of business, how about we delve into it over dinner? Sophia blinked, her mind swirling in uncertainty. Excuse me? Who, me? Shall we have dinner? Are you inviting me on a date? Since my intention is simply to have a conversation, I wouldn't really label it as a date. She emitted a startled chuckle. Absolutely. Oh, because millionaires are just known for inviting street vendors to their laid-back dinner parties, aren't they? Dylan inclined his head. What makes that surprising to you? It simply lacks logic. He lifted an eyebrow in curiosity. What is unclear? Me, a man clad in a lavish suit, likely dining at establishments where the price of an appetizer exceeds my monthly rent, extending an invitation for dinner. Dylan gave a nonchalant shrug. What does it matter? Sophia folded her arms across her chest. To prevent that from occurring. So, please share with me. He advanced a step. What is holding you back from agreeing? She gazed at him intently. He appeared utterly earnest. He spoke with a seriousness that left no room for doubt, devoid of any hint of sarcasm or jest, making it clear he was entirely sincere. However, that didn't imply that Sophia had faith in him. I am not something to be played with, Dylan. His brow furrowed. Who claimed that you were? You seek to challenge me, to gauge the limits of my endurance, or perhaps to dazzle me with your wealth. However, I refuse to be deceived by that. Dylan let out a heavy breath. Is it common for you to draw so many conclusions about others? It's only when enigmatic millionaires appear unexpectedly, seeking a conversation. What if I expressed my desire to learn more about you? Sophia chuckled softly. I would argue that you're not being truthful. Dylan observed her for a brief moment before he shook his head. Understood. Declined. He took a bottle of water, set a $20 bill on the table, and departed. Sophia watched him intently, her emotions a tangled web of uncertainty. She anticipated that he would press her, attempting to sway her decision. Yet he chose not to, and oddly enough that troubled her. Dylan slid into his car and closed the door behind him, yet he hesitated to turn the key in the ignition. The frustration in her voice lingered in his ears. For the first time, he sensed a loss of control over the situation. Sophia stood apart from every woman he had encountered before. She sought nothing from him. Perhaps for that very reason, he craved her presence even more. Dylan was aware that this wouldn't be their final meeting, and Sophia was equally cognizant of it. She simply wasn't prepared to acknowledge it. The following morning dawned under a blanket of clouds, yet Sophia's spirits were shrouded in an even deeper gloom. She attempted to follow her daily routine as normal, yet the reality was that her dialogue with Dylan continued to echo in her mind. She believed that after turning down his dinner invitation, he would persist or attempt to win her over in some way. He merely acknowledged her response and departed. That was completely illogical. Individuals like Dylan don't accept rejection lightly. Perhaps what troubled her the most was the lingering hope that he would return. She found that sensation unpleasant. She chose to refrain from placing expectations on others, directing her energy instead towards what truly held significance: her career and her studies. Yet, on that particular day, an unexpected revelation awaited her. Sophia stood in line at the university's administration office, her patience unwavering as she awaited the resolution of her tuition fee issue. She was aware that she had fallen behind on several payments and understood the necessity of negotiating, or else her studies would come to a halt. As her moment arrived, the attendant glanced at the computer screen before shifting their gaze back to her. Ah, it appears there are no financial obligations associated with your name. Sophia knitted her brows in concentration. Excuse me? Your financial obligations have been settled. You're ready to go with the university. Her stomach twisted in knots. This has to be an error. The attendant beamed with a warm smile. Absolutely not. The payment has been successfully confirmed by the system. Who covered the cost? It was completed without revealing the identity of the creator. Sophia experienced a wave of dizziness. She instinctively knew who was responsible for that. She shut her eyes, inhaling deeply, attempting to rein in the mounting irritation. Dylan. She acted swiftly. Upon exiting the university, she boarded a bus that headed directly to Mitchell Enterprises, the headquarters of Dylan's company. She was indifferent to his busyness. He had gone too far. Upon her arrival at the building, the receptionist attempted to impede her progress. "Do you have a scheduled meeting?" Sophia managed to put on a smile. "He awaits my arrival." The receptionist cast her a wary glance. "May I ask what your name is?" "Sophia Carter." The woman tapped away at the keyboard, her gaze scanning the screen for her name on the schedule. When it didn't appear, she managed to muster a courteous smile. "Regrettably, he is unable to meet with anyone unless an appointment has been made." "Very well, I shall bide my time." The receptionist's expression darkened. "Excuse me, he may be occupied for quite some time. I possess ample time." Sophia settled into one of the chairs in the lobby. Individuals hurried along, adorned in luxurious attire, engaged in phone conversations, exuding an air of urgency and busyness. She felt out of place in that environment. Yet that didn't trouble her. She wouldn't depart without having a word with Dylan. Dylan quickly discovered her presence. Upon hearing from one of his assistants that Sophia was in the reception, he raised an eyebrow, taken aback. "So what were her words?" "She mentioned that she would wait." He offered a faint smile. Naturally, she would be patient. Dylan rose silently and made his way to the lobby. Upon his arrival, he discovered her seated with her arms crossed, wearing an unmistakably impatient expression. She caught sight of him the moment he emerged. Without hesitation, she rose and made her way over to him. "It's time for a conversation." At this moment, Dylan maintained his composure. "If you truly wanted to see me, you would have accepted the dinner invitation." "Don't toy with me, Mitchell." Dylan offered a faint smile. "Let's head to my office, shall we?" Sophia trailed behind him, her gaze aflame with fury. Upon entering his office, she forcefully shut the door and pivoted to confront him. "You covered my tuition fees." Dylan sat in his chair with a serene demeanor. "What's the matter?" She tightened her jaw. "I never requested anything from you." "I understand. So what prompted you to take that action?" He inclined his head slightly. "Simply because I desired to." Sophia experienced a tightness in her throat. He repeated the very same words he used when he purchased her water. Dylan let out a weary sigh, expressing his discontent. "What seems to be the issue? The ability to pursue your studies without the stress of unpaid bills hanging over you?" Her fists tightened into hard balls. "I would have come to understand it. Indeed, you would have put in thrice the effort, drained yourself completely, and still faced the possibility of losing your position. That doesn't concern you." Dylan rose to his feet. "You're correct, but it's no longer your concern either." Sophia found herself at a loss for words. She felt the urge to engage in a debate, shout, help him see that she was perfectly capable on her own. Yet, beneath the surface, she was aware of the truth. She inhaled deeply. "This remains unchanged. I don't anticipate that it will." Her gaze fixed on him. His apparent sincerity only deepened her frustration. Sophia gently shook her head, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. "You can't purchase my loyalty." Dylan beamed. "If I were inclined to make a purchase, I would have presented a higher offer." Sophia squinted, her gaze sharp and focused. "You are truly insufferable." Dylan moved closer, positioning himself just inches from her. "And you are utterly infuriating. However, I find that appealing." Her heart raced, yet she maintained her composure. She pivoted gracefully and unlatched the door. "This holds no significance, Mitchell." Dylan offered a gentle smile as she made her exit. He understood it held a significance beyond what she was prepared to acknowledge. Sophia exited Mitchell Enterprises with swift, resolute strides. Her heart raced, and her thoughts spiraled in chaos. Dylan Mitchell was insufferable. He possessed an uncanny ability to infuriate her, effortlessly overstepping her boundaries, and to make matters worse, he did so with a serene, challenging gaze. She was torn between two unsettling truths: the reality that he had covered her tuition without her consent, and the uncomfortable relief that bubbled up within her at the gesture. However, that did not alter the situation. it did not alter her essence. It remained true that she had no desire to feel indebted to him. Sophia inhaled deeply, her gaze lifting to the vast expanse of the sky above. The ominous clouds hinted at the impending arrival of a storm. Excellent. As if my day couldn't get any worse. She hurried along, oblivious to the fact that, at that precise moment, Dylan was also lost in thoughts of her. In the confines of his office, Dylan settled into his chair, his eyes fixed on the sprawling city beyond the expansive glass wall. He understood that Sophia would be livid upon discovering he had settled her debt. Yet, despite everything, he found himself unable to hold back. He found it difficult to articulate the depth of his feelings for her. Perhaps it was due to her uniqueness compared to all those he was familiar with. She had no desires or expectations from him. Perhaps, for that precise reason, he felt drawn to her presence. Dylan lifted the receiver and punched in a number. Discover more about Sophia Carter's daily practices. Her workplace, her residence. However, nothing intrusive. I simply want to ensure that she is all right. He ended the call abruptly, leaving his assistant with unasked questions. He lacked the answers himself. Yet he understood that he couldn't simply allow her to leave. The following day, Sophia returned to her familiar place. Despite the disagreement with Dylan, her daily habits remained the same. She still had tasks to complete. She still had to find ways to earn money to meet her expenses. To her astonishment, Dylan made another appearance. He walked over, hands tucked into his pockets, his expression as serene as ever. Sophia let out a weary sigh before he had the chance to speak. It seems you have an unwavering determination, don't you? Dylan offered a faint smile. I've come to appreciate that intriguing bad mood of yours. I'm beginning to find your superior attitude quite intolerable. He brushed off the remark and reached for a bottle of water. What is the cost? Sophia folded her arms across her chest. $2, and this time no gratuity. Dylan passed her the money, yet remained where he stood. Sophia regarded him with a wary gaze. What more do you desire? He uncorked the bottle and savored a sip. I was curious to know if there's still any animosity between us. Are you pleased with the response? Dylan beamed. Not at this moment, but I find pleasure in the journey. She let out an exasperated sigh. You present a challenge. And you have a strong will. And you have a sense of superiority. And you are quite bothersome. Sophia took a moment to reflect and recognized that they were bickering like a couple of children. She let out a weary breath. All right, you've emerged victorious. Dylan arched an eyebrow. Is that an admission of defeat? Leave now or I might just splash this water on you. Dylan chuckled. Looking forward to our meeting tomorrow, Seller. He turned and walked away, leaving Sophia to watch him disappear, grappling with the inexplicable warmth blossoming in her chest. Uncertainty enveloped her, yet one thing was clear. That man was destined to remain a part of her life for the foreseeable future. The hours seemed to stretch endlessly for Sophia. Following the short yet powerful exchange with Dylan, she became preoccupied as she sold water. She loathed the idea of acknowledging it, yet his presence had an undeniable impact on her. Not in a typical manner such as a clear romantic attraction. Felt like an ongoing struggle. He pushed her limits. He challenged her sense of self-worth. And in a rather vexing manner, she found it impossible to disregard him. However, there was one crucial aspect. Dylan Mitchell appeared to be someone who wouldn't back down without a fight. And Sophia was on the brink of validating that in the most unfortunate manner. As dusk settled, a tempest started to brew above New York. Sophia had intended to sell water until late, but as the first raindrops began to fall, the flow of pedestrians dwindled. With a heavy sigh, she began to pack the bottles into her cooler, preparing herself for departure. Just as she was about to shut her cooler, a sleek black car came to a stop right in front of her. The window descended gradually, unveiling Dylan Mitchell behind the wheel. He observed her for a brief moment before addressing her in a relaxed manner. Seems you're on the verge of getting drenched. Sophia folded her arms across her chest. I can handle it. Indeed, you embody the essence of pride and self-reliance. But just for today, would you consider accepting a ride? She paused, uncertainty flickering in her mind. Receiving a favor from him was never in her intentions. However, the rain intensified, and she was reluctant to make her way home drenched. With a weary exhale, she reached for her cooler and swung open the car door. If you attempt to persuade me once more that you're not an eccentric millionaire, I might just leave midway. Dylan offered a smile, yet remained silent. For a few moments, the journey was enveloped in silence. Dylan's car was flawless. The aroma of fresh leather and pristine surroundings set this car apart from any Sophia had experienced before. She stole a sidelong glance at him. Dylan navigated the road with an impassive demeanor, his gaze steady ahead, seemingly at ease in the quietude. However, Sophia was not. What motivates you to engage in this activity? Dylan kept his gaze firmly fixed on the road ahead. What should I do? Peer unexpectedly. Purchase water that isn't necessary. Settle a financial obligation that doesn't belong to you. Dylan released a soft sigh. Perhaps I find joy in assisting others. Sophia let out a derisive laugh. Wealthy individuals rarely extend their support to those in my position without a motive. Dylan glanced at her for a fleeting instant before redirecting his attention to the road ahead. And who claimed I'm merely an average millionaire? Sophia remained silent. She hesitated to acknowledge that he truly stood apart from the rest. The vehicle glided over the slick pavement when, without warning, the engine coughed and fell silent. Dylan scowled and made another attempt to restart it. Silence. Excellent, he murmured, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. Sophia stifled a chuckle. What transpired? Your high-end vehicle has disappointed you. Dylan let out a sigh, his frustration evident. It seems so. Sophia surveyed her surroundings. A taxi stand is conveniently located just around the corner. Dylan swung the door open, peering into the relentless downpour that drenched the world outside. I refused to dash through the downpour just to hail a cab. Sophia chuckled softly. Ah yes, that slipped my mind. The remarkable Dylan Mitchell remains untouched by water. He regarded her with a defiant gaze. If you feel inclined to dash over there, by all means go ahead. She sighed dramatically and folded her arms across her chest. What comes next? Are we going to be stuck in the car until someone comes to save us? Dylan retrieved his phone and began to type away. I'm reaching out to a driver. It may require some time. Sophia surveyed her surroundings and spotted a hot dog stand nestled beneath a nearby awning. Her lips curved into a smile. I have a clear idea of how we can occupy ourselves. Moments later, Sophia and Dylan found themselves perched on a makeshift bench beside the hot dog stand. The vendor observed them, a blend of intrigue and entertainment dancing in their eyes. Dylan grasped the hot dog with a sense of wonder, as though it were a rare treasure he had just discovered. Sophia, in contrast, devoured hers with no second thoughts. So, Mitchell, you've never experienced one of these before? Dylan glanced at the food, then shifted his gaze to her. That meal isn't quite to my taste, naturally. Your meals must consist solely of exquisite caviar and succulent lobster. He took a bite and grimaced slightly. Sophia chuckled softly. Do you see? Authentic nourishment. Simple dishes without elaborate titles. Dylan took his time chewing, casting a sidelong glance at her. You find pleasure in teasing me, don't you? Her lips curled into a smile. A small amount. Dylan shook his head, yet for the first time he appeared less like a remote, unfeeling CEO. He appeared simply an ordinary fellow. And then, in an instant, Sophia found herself gazing at him longer than intended. She swiftly averted her gaze and sank her teeth into her hot dog once more. Excuse me? Dylan inquired. Silence. He beamed. You were observing me closely. I wasn't. Dylan inclined his head. You were indeed. She let out a deep breath, a wave of frustration washing over her. All right. I was simply attempting to understand your desires. Dylan paused, enveloped in silence for a moment. And then, for the very first time, he laid bare the truth. I'm in the same boat, trying to unravel that as well. Sophia's eyes fluttered momentarily. Excuse me? Dylan maintained her gaze. I'm also in the process of figuring out my desires. Sophia was taken aback by that response. As she prepared to speak, Dylan's phone suddenly rang, cutting her off. He responded promptly. Absolutely. Understood. I'm en route. He ended the call and turned his gaze toward her. The car has arrived. Sophia gave a slight nod and completed her meal. Upon returning to the car, an unfamiliar silence enveloped them. It wasn't unpleasant, yet it lacked the familiarity of what once was. As Dylan navigated the road to her home, a realization dawned on Sophia. For the first time, he felt a sense of belonging. For the first time, she felt a reluctance for him to go. The following morning dawned bright and clear, devoid of any trace of the tempest that had raged the night prior. Yet within Sophia, the tempest raged on. From the moment she entered Dylan's car, from the instant she glimpsed a new facet of him, an undeniable change had begun to unfold. She loathed the thought, yet she found herself gradually acclimating to his presence. His biting comments, his obstinacy, his tendency to appear out of nowhere and question everything she expressed. That was quite perilous. Sophia had always embraced her independence. She had always understood that the only person she could rely on was herself. What was it that made Dylan Mitchell feel so distinct from all the people she had encountered? She shook her head, attempting to banish the thought from her mind. She had no room for distractions. It was merely a fleeting instant. Before long, he would lose interest in this game and fade away. That was her belief at the very least. On that very day, Dylan found himself at Mitchell Enterprises, seated behind his sleek glass desk, meticulously going over contracts when a recognizable voice echoed through his office. Dylan, my dear, you simply won't believe what has just transpired. He glanced up to catch sight of Naomi Stanford, a prominent figure among New York's elite, entering with an air of confidence that suggested she was in complete command of her surroundings. Naomi possessed an exquisite beauty, elegant, striking, perpetually enveloped in opulence. A woman accustomed to having her desires fulfilled, including Dylan's focus. Yet he never desired her. She exhibited unwavering determination. Naturally, for reasons unknown, she had concluded that they were destined to be the ideal pair. Despite Dylan's lack of encouragement, Naomi was determined and refused to accept defeat. Naomi, I have my hands full right now. She dismissed him and sank into the chair before his desk. Oh, you consistently are. Nonetheless, I wanted to extend an invitation for dinner this evening. It feels like forever since we last ventured out. Dylan let out a weary sigh, his impatience palpable. I have not consented to it at any point. That's merely a minor point. Someday you will. With a dramatic roll of his eyes, he redirected his focus to the screen before him. I won't be attending. Naomi let out a deep breath. So, what's with the rumors about you hanging out with a street vendor? Dylan paused his typing. He gradually raised his eyes. Who made that statement? Naomi gave a slight shrug. I'm not quite sure. Whispers, I suppose. It's no secret that New York thrives on its tales and whispers. But please, is it really true? Dylan reclined in his chair. And if it is, what's the issue? Her eyes grew large with surprise. This can't be serious. Dylan Mitchell, a figure of immense influence in the city, strolling alongside a girl devoid of status, identity, or recognition. He found her tone unappealing. Dylan had always been the type to remain unfazed by the opinions of others. However, the manner in which Naomi discussed Sophia troubled him profoundly. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with a chilling intensity. Be mindful of your words. Naomi chuckled, yet her posture revealed a hint of unease as she adjusted in her seat. Indeed, it seems the whispers have been confirmed. It's clear that you have a genuine interest in her. Dylan remained non-committal. He fixed his gaze on Naomi, and after a moment, her patience wore thin and she walked away. However, the issue was that Naomi was not the type to embrace failure without a fight. And that was poised to become a far greater issue than he had anticipated. Later that day, Sophia remained at the university, acutely aware of the murmurs swirling around her. The students gazed at her, their expressions a mix of intrigue and lightheartedness. She remained puzzled until she caught a snippet of a conversation. I can hardly wrap my head around the fact that he's spending time with her. Have you spotted Naomi? She is seething with anger. He has to be playing games with her. What more could someone like Dylan Mitchell desire from a girl like her? Sophia sensed a flush creeping across her cheeks. And that was the end of it. Dylan wasn't the sole figure drawing interest. The whole city was abuzz with chatter about them. And the reason bore a name. Naomi Stanford. Sophia was uncertain about the specifics of Naomi's words. Yet she sensed her involvement in the matter. She was determined not to let it pass unnoticed. As the afternoon waned, Sophia made her way to Mitchell Enterprises once more. She stepped into the building, and this time she took the initiative without waiting for approval. She strode confidently to Dylan's office and swung the door open, unannounced. He gazed upward, taken aback. Sophia? She shut the door firmly and folded her arms across her chest. I have a question that needs answering. Dylan let out a deep sigh. It was clear from the outset that this conversation would not unfold smoothly. What comes next? What's the reason behind everyone in your company discussing me? His brow furrowed. Could you clarify what you mean? Don't act clueless, Dylan. Your dear companion Naomi chose to share some rumors. Dylan sensed a surge of anger rising within him. And that was the conclusion. He ought to have anticipated that Naomi would orchestrate something like this. Sophia pressed on, her patience beginning to fray. I expressed my desire to remain outside of your realm. Yet you continue to pull me into it. I didn't pull you into anything. Indeed, you did. Now people are regarding me as if I'm merely an object for their amusement. As if I'm just a punchline. Dylan rose to his feet, his voice resolute. Are you concerned about their opinions? Her jaw tightened in determination. Absolutely, I care. This is my story, Dylan. I refuse to be the focal point of a game I never opted into. He inhaled deeply. It was never my intention to cause you pain. However, you did. They locked eyes, an electric tension hanging between them. Sophia felt an overwhelming urge to shout, to turn her back and disappear from his life forever. Yet, beneath the surface, a part of her yearned for him to invite her to remain. Yet he chose not to. Dylan understood that pressing the issue would be futile. Sophia found herself unprepared to grasp the complexities of their connection. He let out a deep breath. If you feel the urge to leave, then leave. Sophia experienced a constriction in her chest. She had anticipated that he would persuade her to think differently. Yet he took no action to prevent her. With a finality that echoed in the silence, she turned on her heel and exited his office, the door slamming shut behind her. Dylan remained rooted to the spot, his gaze fixed on the ground beneath him. After a long time, he sensed that something significant was slipping away from him. Yet he was completely at a loss for how to resolve the issue. That night, Sophia found herself unable to drift off into slumber. She ought to have experienced a sense of relief for finally bringing closure to that chaos. Yet, all she experienced was a void that defied understanding. Meanwhile, Dylan, across the city, pondered whether she would find it in her heart to forgive him. The morning dawned in shades of gray and dampness, reflecting the turmoil within Sophia's heart. She awoke, burdened by the same oppressive sensation that had haunted her throughout the night. The memory of her meeting with Dylan the previous day lingered in her thoughts. She ought to have experienced a sense of relief for finally bringing closure to that chaos. She ought to have felt a sense of relief for having distanced herself from an intrusive millionaire who persistently appeared in her life without invitation. Yet, she was left with an unnameable emptiness. Though she tried to deny it, there was an undeniable ache for his presence. That thought only served to deepen her irritation. She simply couldn't bear the thought of losing anyone. Sophia rose from her slumber and endeavored to concentrate on what truly held significance. Labor, education, and existence. Meanwhile, Dylan Mitchell was experiencing his own turmoil that night. He was not the type to linger over choices. He had consistently embraced a pragmatic approach, advancing without glancing in reverse. For the first time in years, he discovered himself lost in thought. Or perhaps an individual. Sophia Carter. She was headstrong, volatile, exasperating. Yet she was undeniably authentic, resilient, and truly unique. Despite allowing her to leave, he found it impossible to dismiss the emotions swirling within him. That morning, he resolved to take action. If Sophia preferred not to receive his direct assistance, he would seek out alternative methods to support her. Sophia's routine grew increasingly challenging in Dylan's absence. Recently, she observed that her study time had diminished. In addition to selling water on the streets, she now found herself taking on extra shifts at the restaurant where she worked in the evenings. Her superior, a brusque and intolerant individual, held a disdain for her. To maintain your position, it's essential to arrive on time. Sophia inhaled deeply, suppressing her fatigue. I arrived on time. Indeed, that was the case. If you choose not to adhere to the guidelines, you are free to depart. She understood that debate was futile. She was desperate for that job. She held back the words she longed to say and returned to the kitchen. Unbeknownst to Sophia, Dylan had been observing her quietly from a distance. Once she exited his life, he instructed one of his assistants to quietly keep an eye on her circumstances. He was reluctant to encroach upon her personal space. He simply wanted to ensure that she was all right. And based on what he had discovered, she was not. She was mistreated by her boss. The invoices were accumulating. Yet, she remained steadfast in her decision not to seek assistance. Dylan Mitchell was not the type to remain passive when something troubled him. Unbeknownst to Sophia, he began to take decisive steps. In the days that ensued, peculiar events began to unfold in Sophia's existence. Initially, her restaurant supervisor was let go. Without any explanation, a new manager was abruptly brought on board. He exhibited a greater level of politeness and appeared to have a fondness for Sophia. If you ever need to depart early for your academic pursuits, simply inform me. Sophia felt a wave of astonishment wash over her. Her previous employer had always lacked that level of empathy. Yet she chose to embrace her fortune without a second thought. Then, an unusual occurrence took place. The pipes in the small apartment she shared with her mother abruptly ceased their incessant dripping. For weeks, the pipe lay broken, yet by morning, it had been mended. What transpired? Sophia inquired of her mother. I have no idea, her mother replied. This morning, everything was functioning perfectly, as far as I can tell. Sophia scowled. Yet, the most astonishing revelation was yet to unfold. One morning, Sophia ventured to the university to inquire about her overdue tuition balance. She understood that confronting it was inevitable, whether now or later. Upon arriving at the office, she was informed that her tuition had been fully covered until the semester's conclusion. Sophia experienced a shiver that coursed down her spine. Surely that can't be right. The woman at the desk gave a slight shake of her head. Indeed, all is accurate. Payment has been made on your behalf. Sophia quickly pieced together the clues to uncover the culprit. Dylan. She burst out of the university, seething with anger. His assistance was inconsequential. The issue arose from the fact that he had proceeded without seeking permission. She picked up her phone and called him. After 3 rings, he finally picked up the phone. Sophia. She gritted her teeth. Don't act like you don't know. You're aware of the reason for my call. Dylan Mitchell maintained a steady tone on the other end. If this is a call of gratitude, I appreciate it. She let out a derisive laugh. This does not express gratitude. I assumed as much. Sophia paused on the sidewalk, her eyes gently shutting as she took a moment for herself. What compels you to continue this way? Simply because I can. She slowly opened her eyes. That response lacks authenticity. Dylan let out a heavy breath. Sophia, you may not appreciate my assistance, but it's undeniable that your life has become somewhat simpler as a result. She remained quiet, for she understood, beneath the surface, that he held the truth. However, that didn't imply she enjoyed it. This was never something I sought out. I never sought approval to pursue what I believe is just. Sophia sensed her frustration building. You are truly beyond comprehension. And you have a strong will. She nibbled on her lip. Dylan was resolute in his ways. And for some inexplicable reason, a part of her resisted the idea of him doing so. However, that certainly didn't imply she would passively accept his actions without putting up a struggle. Sophia understood that this contest between them was far from finished. For the first time, she found herself uncertain about wanting it to conclude. The days unfolded with a certain ease for Sophia, at least in concept. The transformations Dylan implemented in her life significantly influenced her journey. With a lighter heart, she could finally immerse herself in her studies. However, that didn't imply she was content with the circumstances. A heaviness lingered in her heart whenever she recalled Dylan's actions. At its core, the issue lay not in his actions. Despite everything that had transpired, her thoughts remained fixated on him. Dylan, in contrast, observed everything from afar. He understood that Sophia would never agree to his assistance if she discovered the truth. Yet, he pressed on regardless. He attempted to persuade himself that it held no significance. Yet as time went on, his longing for her only deepened. That yearning was precisely what led him to the university fundraiser that evening. He was certain Sophia would be present. Moreover, he felt an undeniable urge to reunite with her. Sophia found herself at the event, assisting the professors in coordinating the donors, when a soft murmur began to weave its way through the room. She scanned the surroundings, and as soon as her gaze landed on the newcomer, her body went rigid. Dylan Mitchell. He entered with his usual air of assurance. His suit was flawless. His expression was solemn. Every aspect of him radiated authority. And yet, he bore no resemblance to the man who had shared hot dogs with her amidst the storm. Sophia experienced a tightness in her throat. Yet, just as she was about to pivot and flee, Dylan's gaze locked onto hers. In that instant, she realized that fleeing was not a possibility. He approached her, each step resolute and purposeful. Sophia folded her arms, attempting to project an air of indifference. It seems the city's affluent have finally chosen to take meaningful action. Don't you think? Dylan offered a faint smile. Some events capture my attention more than others. Or specific individuals. He arched an eyebrow. Perhaps. Sophia let out a deep breath. What brings you here, Dylan? He paused, enveloped in silence, before eventually responding. I had to see you. She took a deep breath. She was taken aback by the straightforward reply. What for? Another installment of your wealthy savior narrative? Dylan gave a slight shake of his head. Honestly, Sophia emitted a humorless chuckle. Oh, so now you're ready to come clean? After quietly assisting me while making choices about my life without consulting me. He inhaled deeply. I never intended to upset you, Sophia. I merely wished. He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Excuse me? She folded her arms across her chest. What were you hoping for? Dylan gazed deeply into her eyes. I simply wished to create something for you. Due to my concern. Sophia experienced a brief catch in her breath. Compassion does not equate to dictating my existence. Refusing assistance does not equate to true strength. She remained silent in the face of that. And then he uttered the final words she could have never anticipated. My heart found its home in you, Sophia. Her heart paused for a moment. She blinked, attempting to absorb the weight of those words. Excuse me? Dylan maintained her gaze. I found myself captivated. From the moment I first spotted you peddling water on the street, confronting the world with that bold smile. Once I understood that you sought nothing from me, that you never yielded to anyone. Sophia found herself at a loss for words. It felt like the world had faded away, leaving only them in its wake. Is this for real? I have never been more earnest in my existence. Her heart raced with intensity. Yet, concurrently, a sense of fear enveloped her. For her, acknowledging her feelings for him was synonymous with embracing a reality that would irrevocably alter the course of her life. At this moment, she felt uncertain about her readiness for what lay ahead. Dylan lingered, anticipating a response. Yet Sophia chose to remain quiet. He was reluctant to impose any pressure on her. Yet, he had to find out if hope lingered on the horizon. Sophia. She gazed at him, and he perceived the turmoil reflected in her eyes. Time is essential for me. Dylan inclined his head with a measured, deliberate gesture. I comprehend. Yet he had no intention of turning his back. This isn't the moment. At that moment he realized she shared his feelings. She simply had to come to terms with it. And when she was prepared, he would be there anticipating. Dylan's confession reverberated in Sophia's mind, striking with the force of thunder on an otherwise serene day. My heart found its home in you, Sophia. At that moment, words eluded her. I was at a loss for how to respond. As she strolled through the bustling streets of New York, her mind was consumed with a single question. What now? Sophia had never envisioned that a person of Dylan Mitchell's stature, the seemingly unreachable CEO, could ever develop feelings for someone like her. What's the most frustrating aspect? She was aware that her emotions for him ran deep as well. However, acknowledging that would entail embracing the reality that her life would be transformed indefinitely. And that was the unsettling aspect. As the days went by, Dylan maintained his distance. Not due to a loss of hope for her, but because he understood the importance of allowing her the space to reflect. He had previously expressed his feelings. At this moment, the choice lay solely in her hands regarding his presence in her life. However, Dylan Mitchell lacked patience. As the yearning reached its peak, he realized he must seek her out once more. Sophia stood at her regular post, vending water, when she caught the sound of familiar footsteps drawing near. She could sense his presence without even glancing over. Yet, she glanced nonetheless. Dylan was present, with his hands tucked away in his pockets. An earnest demeanor. His gaze was locked onto her. Sophia paused, her breath caught in her throat. He remained silent at first. He casually grabbed a bottle of water from the crate and passed her the cash. As Sophia extended her hand to grasp the bills, he lingered, holding her fingers for a heartbeat longer than required. Have you come to a conclusion? He inquired gently. Sophia experienced a chilling sensation coursing through her spine. She was already well aware of what he meant, for she was already aware. In reality, she had come to a conclusion long before. She simply couldn't find the words to express it verbally. Instead, she accepted the money, placed it in the box, and crossed her arms defiantly. What do you think about having dinner? Dylan arched an eyebrow. Are you inviting me on a date? She gave a slight shrug. Let's refer to it as a trial. I'm curious to see if you can enjoy a regular meal without any grievances. He grinned. I believe I can give it a shot. That evening, they gathered at a quaint eatery, removed from opulence and elite bookings. Dylan, clad in a sharp suit and exuding elegance, captured attention effortlessly. Yet, Sophia remained indifferent. For the first time, she made the choice to be present. Dylan began after savoring a sip of his drink. Does this imply that I can now refer to you as my girlfriend? Sophia beamed. Is your honesty always this direct? Life is fleeting. I like to be direct and concise. She toyed with the napkin resting on the table. This seems to be a test, wouldn't you agree? Dylan arched an eyebrow. A trial? Absolutely. I'm curious to know if you can manage my daily patterns, my tendencies, my disposition. He offered a faint smile. Sophia, having come this far, I believe I will ace the test with great success. She rolled her eyes, yet a smile crept onto her face. The subsequent days unfolded in a manner that was entirely foreign to Sophia. Dylan was far from an ordinary boyfriend. He maintained a balanced demeanor, neither clingy nor excessive. Yet he was perpetually present. In the small details, he always made it a point to stop by her stand, just to pick up a bottle of water. The way he grasped her hand spoke volumes, even in silence. In the way he gazed at her, as though she were the sole inhabitant of his universe, Sophia finally permitted herself to savor the moment. Yet, fear lingered within her. Dylan Mitchell existed in an entirely separate realm from her own, and she understood that eventually, that world would attempt to separate them. Dylan observed her moment of uncertainty. Even in her smiles, even in the kisses she shared with him, there lingered a sense of restraint, a part of her that remained guarded. She belonged to him in part, but not entirely. He realized that a transformation was necessary. Thus, he arrived at a conclusion. On the following evening, he brought Sophia to a unique location, the very spot where he had first laid eyes on her. In that familiar corner, she offered water, her voice ringing out as she greeted customers with a warm smile. Amidst the glow of the city lights, he gently grasped her hand. Sophia scowled. "What are you up to?" Dylan inhaled deeply and lowered himself to one knee in front of her. Sophia experienced a moment where time seemed to freeze, her heart caught in a stillness. Dylan gazed directly into her eyes. "From the instant our paths crossed, it was clear to me that you stood apart from the rest. I realized that everything in my life had changed forever." Her eyes ignited with a searing intensity. "No need to speak." "Absolutely, I do." He retrieved a small box from his pocket and opened it, unveiling a ring that was simple yet strikingly beautiful. "I've never encountered anyone quite like you, Sophia, and I shall never do so. You've revealed to me that some treasures are beyond the reach of wealth. You've shown me that while pride holds significance, love holds an even greater importance." She bit her lip, struggling to contain the swell of emotions threatening to spill over. Dylan grasped her hand with determination. "Today, I have a question for you." He inhaled deeply. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my spouse?" Time appeared to freeze. Sophia sensed a quiver in her legs. She had never envisioned that a person such as Dylan Mitchell would ever consider proposing to someone like her. Yet, as she gazed into his eyes, she understood it was genuine. And deep within her, she had always understood the truth. Her smile was radiant, yet her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Indeed, Dylan beamed with an unprecedented joy. He gently slid the ring onto her finger, and before he could utter another word, Sophia drew him into a passionate kiss. The city around them continued to be unchanged, yet for them everything had transformed. The days following the proposal swept Sophia into a whirlwind of emotions. She had agreed. She had consented to wed Dylan Mitchell. Yet, as she approached this new reality, an increasing sense of fear began to swell within her. Dylan was a figure from a realm beyond our own. Even with the affection she held for him, she couldn't overlook the reality that his realm posed risks for her. Dylan was experiencing a level of happiness like never before. Once Sophia said yes to his proposal, he sensed a change within himself. For the first time in his life, he felt as though he possessed something beyond the reach of wealth. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was troubling Sophia. She remained silent, yet he could perceive it within her gaze. A sense of unease lingered within her. He was troubled by the thought that anxiety was connected to them. The crisis began quietly. Sophia started steering clear of discussions regarding the wedding. Each time Dylan mentioned it, she deftly redirected the conversation. He observed but chose not to insist. Yet, as time passed, she appeared to slip further into the distance. Then came the day when everything erupted. Sophia was at work when she encountered something that ignited her fury. "Have you heard?" One of the staff members was murmuring to a colleague. "CEO Mitchell has acquired this restaurant." "Excuse me?" "Indeed, he acquired it not long ago. However, everything was maintained in a subtle manner. He surely has his justifications." Sophia sensed her heart quicken. Simply couldn't be true. Yet, beneath the surface, she was aware of the truth. Dylan had purchased the establishment where she was employed, and that could signify only one outcome. He attempted to dictate her existence. Sophia acted swiftly. She exited the restaurant and headed directly to Mitchell Enterprises. Seething with anger, "Let's enjoy ourselves with those who merely skim through the comments. Leave a comment with Pepsi. Only those who have journeyed to this point will truly comprehend. Let us return to the narrative." She entered uninvited and strode directly to Dylan's office. His expression was one of astonishment upon seeing her. "Sophia, what's happening?" She shut the door firmly and folded her arms across her chest. "Did you purchase the restaurant where I am employed?" Dylan paused, absorbing the gravity of the situation. He let out a deep sigh. Indeed, Sophia sensed a churn in her stomach. What is the reason behind this? He rose to his feet, sliding his hands into the pockets of his trousers. I wanted to ensure your safety. I aimed to ensure that you were treated with kindness. She laughed, devoid of any amusement. So rather than believing in my ability to advocate for myself, you chose to secure me a position? I hadn't considered it that way. However, that's precisely what you accomplished, Dylan. You're attempting to reshape me into a version that doesn't reflect my true self. His brow furrowed. That is simply not the case. So, why do you keep attempting to fix my issues for me? Dylan inhaled deeply. For the simple reason that my heart belongs to you, Sophia. When you care deeply for someone, your instinct is to shield them from harm. Her heart clenched tightly. Yet, rather than soothing her, those words merely intensified her irritation. She gently shook her head. That isn't love, Dylan. That is mastery. Dylan experienced a cold sensation deep within his chest. Are you truly convinced of that? She paused, enveloped in silence for a moment. With a voice thick with emotion, she uttered the words Dylan dreaded most. I'm unable to commit to marriage with you. Dylan sensed an abrupt stillness enveloping the world around him. He remained completely still. No response. In that instant, all that he held within crumbled to dust. Excuse me? Sophia took a deep breath, struggling to hold back her emotions. I require some time. I must determine whether marriage is truly what I desire. He inhaled deeply. So, you're ending things with me? She averted her gaze. I'm uncertain. Dylan experienced a tightness in his throat. He had never experienced such a profound sense of powerlessness. Yet he refused to plead for her to remain. For one lesson he had gleaned from Sophia, it was that love must be a deliberate decision. Even in the midst of excruciating agony, he managed to nod slowly. If that is your choice, I honor your decision. Sophia sensed a growing pressure in her chest. She anticipated that he would attempt to sway her opinion. Yet he chose not to, and that stung even deeper. In silence, she pivoted away and walked out. For the first time since encountering Dylan, she experienced a profound sense of solitude. Dylan, in stark contrast, remained motionless, a profound sense of loss washing over him as he watched the love of his life drift away. Yet, beneath the surface, he understood that this was far from the conclusion. For when authenticity exists, fate inevitably orchestrates a reunion. He could only wish that this time, Sophia would come to understand that before it was too late. The days following the breakup were nothing short of agony for Sophia. Her choice stemmed from a mix of apprehension, self-importance, and a conviction that independence was essential. Yet the reality? She longed for Dylan, greater than she was prepared to acknowledge. Life continued its course. She toiled, learned, settled expenses. Yet, despite the newfound stability surrounding her, an emptiness trailed behind her with each stride. Despite her best efforts to push it aside, she was acutely aware of the void that lingered. Dylan was struggling as well. He had never encountered a pain quite like this before. In the realm of commerce, he consistently demonstrated an uncanny ability to transform a crisis into an opportunity. But how could he mend something that was not solely in his control? Yet, Dylan Mitchell was never one to embrace failure. One lesson he had come to understand in life was that precious things are worth the struggle. Sophia was the most precious treasure he had ever possessed. That morning, he reached his ultimate conclusion. If Sophia sought evidence that he wouldn't attempt to dominate her, he would provide her with the most significant proof imaginable. The day began just like any other for Sophia. She carefully packed her cooler, ensuring it was filled with fresh water, and made her way to her designated selling spot. Upon her arrival, she encountered a sight that caused her to halt in her tracks. Dylan Mitchell was present. To her astonishment, he was peddling water. On the bustling sidewalk, Dylan stood with a cooler reminiscent of hers, gripping a water bottle tightly as he called out, "Cold water, $2, just what you need in this heat." Sophia found herself at a loss for words. Onlookers observed. A few chuckled. Whispers of astonishment filled the air. Ultimately, Billionaire CEO Dylan Mitchell was peddling water on the street, and he appeared completely unfazed by it all. She approached him, disbelief etched on her face. "Dylan, what are you up to?" He glanced at her, a subtle smile playing on his lips. "Marketing hydration." She folded her arms across her chest. "Quite amusing. Now reveal the truth to me." Dylan passed a bottle to a customer, accepted the payment, and slipped it into his pocket. He turned his gaze toward her. "I am demonstrating my ability to thrive in your realm." Sophia arched an eyebrow. "Have you completely lost your senses?" Dylan advanced a step nearer. "You always feared that I would attempt to alter who you are. However, that was never my desire. I cherish you just the way you are." Her chest constricted. "Dylan?" He continued onward. "Should I find a place in your universe, perhaps you could find a space in mine." Sophia paused, her breath caught in her throat. In that instant, she understood the true meaning behind his words. As time slipped away, Sophia and Dylan found themselves selling water side by side for the very first time. He mastered the art of beckoning customers, managing transactions, and withstanding the relentless heat radiating from the pavement. With each fleeting moment, Sophia discovered deeper layers of the man who had captured her heart. Not the influential leader, not the affluent individual enveloped in opulence. Yet it was Dylan who was undertaking all of this for her. The Dylan who yearned to demonstrate his affection. In that moment, she understood that there was no longer any need to fight against it. As the day drew to a close, Sophia found herself unable to restrain her feelings any further. She cast her gaze upon him. His face glistened with sweat. His hair was disheveled. His costly suit utterly destroyed. And she realized she was done with the struggle. In a spontaneous moment, she gently cradled his face and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brimming with deep emotion, a sense of relief, and a love that remained unvoiced. Dylan embraced her with a fervor that suggested he had been anticipating this moment since the very first day their paths crossed. As they separated, a smile spread across his face. "Does this imply that I have successfully passed the test?" Sophia let out a gentle laugh. "I no longer wish to continue running." Dylan drew her in tighter. "Then never run from me again," she nodded. "Never again." In that instant, an understanding passed between them. They were trapped in this for eternity. The subsequent days unfolded in a manner that was entirely foreign to Sophia. At this point, all uncertainties had vanished. Fear has been vanquished. Break free from barriers. She adored Dylan. For the first time, she fully surrendered to that love. However, that certainly didn't imply that the journey would be straightforward. Though she had welcomed Dylan into her world, the obstacles were just beginning. A significant shift occurred when Sophia got a letter from the university. She received a full scholarship offer. As she held the letter, tears welled up in her eyes, for she understood the significance of this moment. After countless efforts and numerous struggles, she could finally pursue her studies without the burden of financial worries. And deep down, she understood that Dylan had played a crucial role in making this happen. Yet, on this occasion, she found no trace of anger within her. At this moment, clarity washed over her. He had no intention of exerting control over her. He simply wished to witness her aspirations blossom into reality. Dylan was overjoyed by the news. Yet, he understood that Sophia would never agree to any form of preferential treatment. Thus, he chose to commemorate in an unconventional manner. He organized an intimate dinner at a restaurant she enjoyed. Nothing overly elaborate. Only the two of them. A serene dining experience. And an evening to honor. Upon their arrival, Sophia cast him a wary glance. "Did you orchestrate all of this?" Dylan beamed with delight. "I believed you warranted a celebration." She returned the smile. "Parties aren't my thing, Dylan. I simply require your presence." For the first time, Dylan Mitchell sensed that he had truly discovered a place to belong. However, not all aspects would unfold so easily. Dylan's history remained a hurdle for them. Eventually, he understood that they would have to confront it. A challenge arose with a corporate charity event. Dylan was required to be present. He desired for Sophia to accompany him. Yet she paused. Do you really want to choose me? He grasped her hand gently. I have no desire to take you, Sophia. I must do this, since you have become a part of my life. She let out a soft sigh. Let us proceed. In that instant, she realized she was prepared to confront whatever challenges lay ahead, as long as he was with her. The evening of the occasion had come. For the first time in ages, a flutter of nerves coursed through Sophia, not due to her surroundings of opulence. Yet, she was aware that these individuals would pass their judgments on her. Indeed, she was correct. The gazes, the murmurs, it was evident that she was not invited. Yet, as she met Dylan's unwavering gaze, she realized that everything else faded into insignificance. He was indifferent to their opinions, nor should she. Yet the unavoidable took place. Naomi Stanford, the woman who had once pursued Dylan, quickly made her way over. Indeed, it is true. You're truly committed to her. Sophia remained resolute. Absolutely. Is there an issue? Naomi beamed. A contrived, measured grin. None. I found it rather intriguing. Sophia folded her arms across her chest. Inquisitive. What is the reason? A man like Dylan has always enjoyed the finest things. Dylan cut in before Sophia had a chance to reply. And now I possess the finest. Naomi's complexion drained of its vibrancy. Sophia grasped Dylan's hand. In that moment, she realized she was precisely where she was meant to be. She had nothing to prove to anyone. The love she shared with Dylan stood as undeniable evidence. As they exited the event, Sophia paused briefly to gaze at Dylan. Do you truly want to be with me? Dylan arched an eyebrow. Do you still have your doubts? She gave a slight shrug. I have complete confidence. I simply long to hear you utter those words. He grinned. Sophia Carter, I desire your presence beside me for all eternity, and nothing in this world will sway my conviction. In that instant, Sophia realized that fear no longer held power over her. With him, she had at last discovered where she truly belonged. The days following the event were the most serene that Sophia had ever experienced. Not due to life becoming simpler, but because she had finally found a sense of security with Dylan by her side. At this moment, all fear had vanished, insecurity was absent, and barriers no longer existed. Their love had endured it all. Sophia stood poised, prepared to embrace the next chapter of her journey. Dylan was aware that the moment had arrived. From the instant he understood that life without Sophia was unimaginable. He had yearned to propose to her. At last, he had discovered the way to accomplish it. He had no desire for opulence. He sought nothing extravagant. He desired something straightforward, genuine, just as she preferred. That morning, he orchestrated the most astonishing surprise for Sophia. Sophia stirred from her slumber, her phone buzzing with a new message. Dylan, rendezvous with me at the spot where everything began. Her brow furrowed in discontent. Where did it all begin? In that moment, it dawned on her that he was hoping she would accompany him to his former selling location. And her heart fluttered unexpectedly. Upon her arrival at the location, she halted, taken aback. The venue was adorned with unique decorations. Delicate lights twinkled overhead, while flower petals lay gently strewn across the ground, and a cooler sat invitingly in the center. And next to it, Dylan stood, beaming. Sophia made her way forward with deliberate steps. Dylan, what is going on here? He retrieved a bottle of water from the cooler and offered it to her. I needed to ensure you took this final bottle. Sophia beamed with delight. Just as she was about to speak, he lowered himself to one knee, and her universe came to a halt. Dylan lifted the lid of a small box, unveiling a ring that was both simple and strikingly beautiful. With a grave and heartfelt expression, he uttered the words that would remain etched in Sophia's memory forever. Sophia Carter, from the moment I first laid eyes on you selling water on the street, your defiant smile etched itself into my memory, and I realized my life would take a turn I never anticipated. Her eyes ignited with a searing intensity. You showed me that love is not something that can be purchased, that true pride involves embracing those who care for us, and that joy can be found in the simplest moments. She bit her lip, struggling to suppress the tears that threatened to spill. So, I find myself wondering, will you choose to share your life with me from this moment onward? Sophia experienced a surge of emotion that felt like an explosion in her chest. Without a moment's pause, she uttered the only words that came to her mind. With a smile, Dylan slipped the ring onto her finger, and before words could escape their lips, Sophia drew him into a passionate kiss. The surroundings faded away. At this moment, everything else faded away. They were there for one another, and that was everything they required. A month later, the wedding unfolded. Sophia preferred a simple affair, while Dylan was determined to ensure it matched her vision perfectly. The ceremony was modest and unpretentious, yet brimming with affection. She donned a dress that was both delicate and elegant, without any embellishments. He held her hand tightly, never releasing his grip for even a moment. As the judge declared them husband and wife, Dylan gently cupped her face and murmured, "I love you, my wife." Sophia beamed. "I adore you even more." That evening, as they twirled beneath the shimmering city lights, Sophia realized she had discovered her true sanctuary. Not in a grand mansion, not in riches, but in the embrace of Dylan Mitchell. For the first time in her life, she felt an undeniable certainty that this was merely the beginning. What are your thoughts on the narrative of Sophia and Dylan? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please provide a rating for this story on a scale from 0 to 10. How would you rate it? Join us by subscribing to the channel and turning on the bell to stay updated with all our narratives. You're welcome to explore more heartfelt narratives by clicking here at the end screen.